Big thanks to all our sponsors. Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks also to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. If you want to order some, then you can go to their website, mrvickies.co.uk, or telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks also to New Workwear. They were set up in 2018 and they are an agile and dedicated workwear provider. You can find them at their website, newworkwear.com. Thanks to Media Arts as well for all the help with the video side of things. If you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the subscribe button under this video. Hit the thumb up to like the video and click share to share to your other social media. We're also available as a podcast on your podcast providers such as iTunes and Spotify. If you'd like to take out a cult membership, which means you get a cup, a pen, a membership card, a scarf, and entry into the monthly draw, then put your smartphone over this QR code now. It'll take you straight to the site. You can set up and pay a one-off fee of £25. Alternatively, go to nufcmatters.com and check for membership. If you're a subscriber, you can apply for a free car sticker. Just email John at nufcmatters.com to claim yours today. The new Shearer raffle is up and running. 150 tickets, £1 a ticket to win a limited edition Alan Shearer signed ball. Enter now at nufcmatters.com. We've got a couple of events coming up. Newcastle United question and answer live with Liam Kennedy, Jordan Cronin and Dominic Skerr from Newcastle World and the Shields Gazette in association with NUFC Matters. Takes place at the Tyneside Irish Centre, 11th of August at 7 p.m. and tickets are £5. The Christmas event will be with Frank Clark and John Gibson, Thursday, December the 7th at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets are £15 from nufcmatters.com. And Waddle, Keegan and Beardsley, the class of 84 with special guests, takes place at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House on Westcott Road in Newcastle on Thursday, January the 25th. Tickets are available direct from the theatre, 0844 24 91 000, or go to the website for further details. And don't forget, starting on the 7th of August, you will be able to hear myself, Steve Wraith, on the Northeast Footy Breakfast. This comes to you in association with the Toon Radio, 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock, 5 days a week. Check out the Facebook for more details.
Attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Good morning, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith and Liam Kennedy, and this is an ungodly hour for Liam. Hi,
I
Liam.
look knackered. Look at this man.
Lots of chat as to what's actually going on with Liam. Is he having a haircut? Is he shaving the tash? Geordie Tumbley says it was never a tash, it was brown sauce off his bacon son.
No, to be fair, you'd say that about me beard maybe, but the tash pretty strong. Got strong tash game.
It is pretty strong. You definitely got a strong tash game, mate. Yeah, you featured in the lookalikes on the Three Amigos more last week than you did this week. Like, so maybe the people are getting used to it, Liam. I think that's a good thing. As always, we've got an hour to talk about Newcastle United. Your brains will be picked, I'm sure, about ins and outs and any info you may have got from you and your colleagues at the Shields Gazette and Newcastle World. And Roger asked, and he's watching live before he goes off to do a presentation today. So good luck, Roger. Is Barnes looking like it's done? I mean, there's a lot of noise about this whole Barnes transfer. We've seen it, go on for the last couple of weeks. What's your thoughts thoughts, Liam? What's your gut instinct on this one? Is it going to get done? He didn't play in the friendly. We saw Jordan mentioned that he didn't feature in the friendly for Leicester, which would imagine that a move could be closer. But where to? Who knows? I guess.
So if you want me gut instinct, I'd say it will. I'm as sure as I possibly can be that a deal will get done.
Okay.
But is it done now? I think that's probably a little bit more up in the air. It's not done now. I mean, let's just talk about it. I mean, the lads had, whether it's himself or his representatives, they've been looking at a very, very expensive property in Morpeth. So you don't really go that far. And I mean, when I'm saying looking at, I'm not saying just prospectively talking about virtually getting the deal done. So you don't really get to that point and not sign for the football club. So yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of exclusive information for NUFC matters there.
Excellent.
Written in a fashion by Dominic Skerr for the Gazette and Jordan Cronin for the Newcastle World website. But yeah, it's giving you a little bit more. Yeah, you don't get that far down the line and not get a deal done. I think it's purely, my understanding of it is Newcastle really need to start shifting players out the door because of the wages. Really, they're just carrying too much fat. Basically, there's not. And I speak as a man of good experience in that sense. You need to trim it. You need to get rid of, your Manquios, your Lewis. They've got 5 keepers on the books. You need to get rid of, there's players like Hayden and Hendrick who they're going to have to give away or send out on loan. Ryan Fraser is a massively overpaid expense in the forward areas. There's so many of these players that just need to be trimmed off the wage bill. And then on top of that, so that's the less than saleable assets. That's the ones ideally you want to shift, but will find it tough to get rid of. The ones that they're going to have to probably this summer get rid of somebody that you don't necessarily want to. And I think there's a lot of people in the Saint-Maximin camp in that respect. I know he only signed a new deal. I think it was even this year, but I don't really think you're ever going to get a point where you can sell Miguel Almiron for more money. I think he's probably at the high point of his career, and us knowing the team and the players as we do, we all love him. But you've got to look at it and say he's at the peak of his powers. Is he ever going to get any better than this? And we'll probably know the answer to that because we've seen enough of him now to know he was really almost overperforming at times last season. And look, I hope it continues because I like the lad. I think he's got a great attitude. His family, I mean, you just see it from the summer content that the likes of his missus puts on, having the Ben and a Newcastle United birthday party while they're back in Paraguay and all this kind of stuff. And he's always got a little black and white shirt on, mini Miggy. And it's lovely that they're really, ingratiated with it, everything, the culture, the city. It's amazing to see. But you've got to look at a pure football perspective. Could you potentially trim Miguel Almiron, make a little bit of money and reinvest that into the squad? Possibly. I don't know how that would all work. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm some kind of FFP expert. We need financial heads on for that, and that's not me. So I'm not going to pretend to say I know exactly the ins and outs of amortization and spreading things over contracts and things like that. I don't understand it. I've got a limited understanding of it, having obviously done research on it, but I'm not about to sit here and spout saying I know this, that, and the other, and how much that would save and how much it wouldn't, because I just don't know the answers to that. There's more intelligent, more financially savvy people out there than me who will be able to tell the answer to that. There might even be some in the comments, so if you know that those kind of answers, get involved in the chat. But there's other players. I mean, there's ones, for me, I would look at someone like Jamal Lascelles, and it's an area where Newcastle aren't well stocked, being brutally honest. I think I said it last summer, and I thought the big oversight was the midfield last summer, and it turned out that it was. I'm not saying I'm a know-it-all smart ass or whatever. Like, I don't know it all, but I think there's a slight oversight of the defence this year. I really do. think you've got an aging backline, one which lacks pace, variety. I think it really needs addressed. So what I'm going to say next doesn't make a lot of sense, but Jamal Lascelles is probably one of those players where you'd look at and say, if he became available on the market and started getting offered round, there would be players, there would be clubs interested in Jamal Lascelles because he's got a good pedigree. But he's the one player in the squad, and this is going to sound really weird, but there's one player in the squad that I think there's something magical about the fact that if he got to play Champions League football, I think there'd be something really special about that to me.
Yeah,
I know everyone's going to think that why are you saying that, but he was one of the lads who really stood up for this football club and for us as fans when there was no one else to do that, and he was a young lad at the time, and he's been through the journey from relegation, promotion, all the way through the rubbish into this positive time. There would just be something quite nice, circle of life-esque that would come round, that suddenly he would be able to walk out with a captain's armband on once, with the Champions League music playing. I think that would be quite an amazing thing. And I think it's something he deserves. Not always been the best performer, not always been the best option, isn't at the moment. But I just think there'd be something quite special about that circle coming around. You've got to look at the rest of the defenders, and apart from those obvious ones that I mentioned, Manquillo, Lewis, who are the obvious ones to trim from that back line, that back unit, I would say you've got to look possibly, is Matt Targett one? If you're going to sign a left back, which I think they need to, I don't believe that Matt Targett gives them enough of a second option to Dan Burn, because at the moment, no matter what anybody wants to say and wants to pick their own little 11 or whatever, Dan Burn is still your left back now. Still your left back. There's no change in that. There's nobody come in to adjust that. Matt Targett, I like Matt Targett. I think he's a decent player, but he's a decent player to a level. And I think if they're going to upgrade in areas, it's one that you would get rid of Matt Targett and you would bring a left back in who I would like to see. I think the one thing that always concerns me about the Newcastle United backline, and I really don't want this to sound like a negative first 10 minutes. I hope it's not, Steve.
I think you're making some valid points. Actually, one of the points I wanted to bring up with you was about the back line. Is the back line slow? Is that something? Is pace going to be an issue at the back for Newcastle this season? And I think I thought it was
going to be last season, Steve. I really did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I might have even said it on one of your shows. I definitely talked about it in some of the videos that we did for Newcastle World with Jordan Cronin. I had concerns that a back four of Trippier, Targett, and any one of, I think at the time we'd probably thought it was going to be Burn and Botman. I'd share into that mix. Of those 5 defenders, none of them have got any pace. None at all. And I was surprised that it took 30 games or so. Was it 30 games? 29, 30, 31 games? That Aston Villa game for teams to work out and tear it to bits over the top. Which Ollie Watkins did that day. It happened a couple of times actually towards the end of the season with that, but you kind of fault them. I mean, they were the joint with Manchester City, I think, remembering back, the leanest, meanest defence in the Premier League. And can you really argue? I mean, nobody really managed to find them out. Mm-hmm. But I would say if you're looking at potential problems, potential bumps down the road, you would say that there is a distinct lack of recovery pace in that back line.
Villa showed the frailties. That was the game which was a bit of a warning sign, Liam, because they played up the shoulder, they got behind, and they decimated us with their pace. We didn't have an answer to it, and that was the game that you look at and think that was against one of your supposed rivals, and we were outplayed that day.
Yeah, and let's be honest about this. I'm really impressed with what they're doing there. We might not like them because of that weird rivalry they sparked up, 10 or so years ago. But I'd say it as we say it. I think the business they're doing is incredible. They're going to get Pau Torres, centre half, who's been on Manchester United's radar for the last 4 or 5 years, to go and get him because of the manager, They already probably, in terms of depth-wise, probably had a slightly deeper squad than us anyway, in terms of quality. To then go and add the real bits of, Champions League quality, which they're adding in Pau Torres, potentially Moussa Diaby, if they go and get that deal done. If they're adding these bits of Champions League flair into what was quite a strong squad anyway, I think Villa are going to be a force this season. I would be surprised if they're not. I mean, you talk about the Thursday night football. Does that make a difference? If you're going to pick a manager in European football who knows how to deal with Thursday night football, it's Unai Emery, isn't it? He's done that consistently throughout his career. I think Villa have done a lot of good things this summer. I think even the midfield, we didn't want Tielemans. I didn't want Tielemans. I think he's a solid signing in the right team. I don't think he's as good as everyone thought he was a few years ago, but nor do I think he's as bad as everybody thinks he was last season. I think he's the type of player that Leicester just constantly last season got overrun in every department. I mean, teams just steamrolled over them. Mm-hmm. We did it for 20 minutes down there at Christmas and surprised ourselves at how easy it was that we absolutely steamrolled them in 20 minutes. But a lot of teams did that. And one of the big problems was midfield. He was just getting overrun constantly. And he's not a guy with a lot of pace, and he isn't a hugely mobile player. But put him in the right team with the right players around him, he's got a lot of quality and can score goals from midfield. So I think that's a good signing for them. If they play at the right system, he wouldn't have fitted in the way we play in our system. He would have been a very poor signing, in my opinion, if we'd gone down that route. And I'm glad that we didn't. But yeah, I think defensively, I look at Kieran Trippier, and you'd say he's 34 next year, in the next calendar year. So you can see why they're looking for a succession plan and somebody to come in after. I'd say Dan Burn, very clever with his positioning, doesn't get caught out too often, but has been susceptible to wingers at times during his spell at left back. And the two centre-halves, Sven Botman, for a young lad, lacks pace. Let's be brutally honest about it. I think it's one of the faults of his game, but he's a very good player at reading the game. And very good with his recoveries, his positioning on recoveries and his blocks, interceptions. He's excellent at that. Fabian Schär is just what a sort of little flourish he's having into his 30s here. Like, incredible. I would argue he was more impressive than Sven Botman last season at centre half. Now, I'm not going to say that'll happen consistently. I thought Fabian Schär was unbelievable, but if there's one thing that Fabian Schär's never had and never relied upon, it's been pace. Mm-hmm. And as soon as a ball goes over his head and he knows he's nowhere near getting it, he's got his hands all over the centre forward and he's taking the booking. It's just kind of what he does because he has to do it. Doesn't get caught out all the time, but when he does, when he has a game, he gets caught out quite a bit. So I think it is one. I think they've really probably got to look to sign somebody to slot into that back four with some pace and some recovery. And the obvious one would be left back. And then you just took Dan Burn as a cover left, cover centre half. And when you're building a squad, I mean, they've got Dummett in as a bit of a... I mean, I'm going to say this because I really like him in the politest possible manner. But, Dummett's a dressing room cheerleader, really, isn't he? I mean, that's essentially what he is. Matt Ritchie, to a large extent, given that, obviously, they keep levels up on the training ground. Taking those kind of players out might unsettle others. It's called squad building. It's not always about putting together the 25 best individuals that you can possibly find. It's all about squad building, which is often why you find certain players get into international squads. Why Gareth Southgate, despite never playing and probably, and this has got Saudi issues and certainly has the red and white fraternity going absolutely crazy. But why, you might put a Jordan Henderson in an England squad. It's because of those levels that he keeps, because of the training, the attitude, and what he expects of the players around him. That's the same thing that Eddie Howe's doing here, really. To basically keeping players like Matt Ritchie who keep the levels high. You can trust him. He's a leader. Not always going to play, but wants him around that squad to keep that consistency and continuity in quality of training and attitude. And, I say cheerleader, and I don't mean that in the derogatory way, but I mean, you listen to the bench and people are shouting, screaming, and it's Matt Ritchie's getting involved, and he's just that character. He's just a character who players want to be around. Paul Dummett, top professional. Top professional has been at the football club for, I think he's the longest serving player now on the books, probably been about 10, 11 years. Yeah, I think it'll be 11 years next year. Just a player that fills a gap and could do left back or centre half if needs be. So I think it's a time that they need to probably inject a little bit of maybe youth, pace, something into that back line, just to give them a different option when there's horses for courses is needed, when there's certain players playing or certain tactics that they're coming up against. They might need somebody with a little bit more speed of recovery. But yeah, I think it probably is, Steve. I think it's one of those things that does get slightly overlooked. Maybe it's not getting overlooked. Maybe I'm not seeing it. If you're picking it out and the people in the chat are talking about it, then I think it's we know our football. We watch it every week. We see it. And I think Eddie Howe will know the same. But it's about, for him this summer, it's about using a reasonably limited budget. It's not limited, but it's reasonably limited given what people's expectations might have been this summer. It's about making sure he injects the right levels of quality into a team that was already really good. And if he can add, I said this at the start of the summer, and I wouldn't, it's kind of playing out a little bit like that. I wouldn't worry too much about getting 5 or 6. I think they'd be happy if they can get 2 to 3 real bits of quality that massively improve starting positions in the team. But I think were they to overlook the left back, I think they could find problems, because I just don't see the depth of players in those positions. You could call it luck. Is it luck? Mm-hmm. They didn't really have many injuries at the back last season. There wasn't anybody out for any significant length of time. That back 5 of Pope plus the 4 was probably one of the consistents throughout the season, that it was always there, always fit and available. There were very few games that had to be changed. I remember Jamal Lascelles coming in for, I think, the Liverpool defeat. Maybe did he come in at Man City? He came in for a few games and he was incredible. Like, never let the team down. So that's a good option to have. But does he fall into that potential saleable asset bracket? Yes. There's questions about what is Emil Kraft, what is he, and what he is he going to be to this football club moving forward? I don't really think anybody's got the answers on that or knows. Just have to get the lad fit and see where he fits in. But a player who's much more at home at right back than he is at centre half, but has done a job there in the past. Good professional, but is he the quality of player that we want at this football club moving forward? Again, there's fair to say there's probably got to be question marks about that. So I think there is a big rebuild to be done in certain areas. I just don't think, as I've said before, that this is always going to be a one window fix. We look at it and say it's easy for us to sit and say now at the start, in mid-summer and go, so right, what do I want? I want a top quality left back. We need another top quality centre half. We want a top quality right forward. We want a top quality centre forward as cover, and we want 2 top quality midfielders. Right, good job, Go on then, Dan. Go and get 6 top quality players, and also you're working on budget. It's just not always going to happen. Like I said before, they're probably 2 windows ahead of where they'd imagined they'd be going into the Champions League, and that's probably, let's just average it out with somewhere in the region of per window, so summer and a winter window, spending probably another 150 million quid. With that, they would probably hope to get 3 to 4 top quality players, and then they would be going into a summer window ahead of the Champions League already much stronger. I think that was probably the hope, but as things stand, they've jumped well ahead of where they'd expected to be, and because of that, there's probably going to have to be a little bit of nudging around and saying, look, if you can sign a 50 million midfielder who I think will significantly improve the team, do I have to forgive it or forget a little bit of strengthening I want to do elsewhere? I think there's a little bit of that going on this summer, and I don't blame them. I think if you can get a level of player that's right up there to improve your team, why would you sign a couple that's right down here? Why would you sign 3 for the same price that's down here? Doesn't make any sense. No point in just filling the squad full of players, as we know, that are then hard to get rid of, or then what we're already finding that that's not squad building. You've got to sign top quality top quality people for the first team, which then in turn drops quality players onto your bench, and that's how you build a squad. Not going about saying, "All right, so we need another left back, we need another centre half and a strike, so I'll just sign any old Tom, Dick, Harry and put them in there," and then he's not good enough for the team really, and he's not, then you struggle to get rid of him again. It doesn't make any sense.
Lots of comments coming in, and yeah, a lot of people agreeing with what we're both saying with regards to pace. And yeah, look, I think there will be a move for defenders, plural, over the next two windows. I think they'll have to do that. I think they will be happy with the right back situation for now, but I think a lot of people are concerned that if there's any injuries, of course, to centre halves or full backs this year, that's where the worry comes in. And I think a lot of people also point out that Newcastle are ahead of the game. We've got to remember that Newcastle's project, was ahead of schedule after last year's, fantastic run and getting into the Champions League positions. We do really need to remember that. Okay, let's get to some of the questions in the chat, which I've saved. Craig Lee says, rumours from Italy that we bid £51 million for Hernandez. Do you think there was a genuine interest, Liam? I can't see us getting him, but he has pace like no one I've ever seen.
I just don't think that we're ever going to spend 50 million quid on a left back. So that probably answers your question. I'm not saying there isn't genuine interest. I think Newcastle, if players become available, or if they think they're available, Newcastle will be interested in all the top players. They're just not really in a position now where they can necessarily sign them all. They have to get lucky a bit. That circumstance has to be right. Everything around the context of around the deal has to fall into place at this current moment in time for Newcastle United to sign that level of footballer. They've done it already with, I would say, trying to think of, Newcastle United are going for all of the in-demand players. Sven Botman was a player who was being courted by a lot of football clubs. And Newcastle United managed to get themselves ahead of the game and get in there. They did the same with Bruno Guimaraes. Alexander Isak's one that you would say would have probably walked into most top teams in world football. Maybe not walked into, but would have got in and would have been a signing that a lot of top clubs would have made. I know that he was definitely on the list of backup options for Manchester City. Had the Erling Haaland deal, which was never really in danger of doing, but had Erling Haaland not happened, I know that Alexander Isak was part of those conversations, which just shows you the kind of level of player that he is. Still don't think we've seen the best of him. I still think there's plenty more to come. And that's one of the big things going into this season I'm really, really excited about. If he can stay injury-free, which he was really unlucky with last season. And his injury record doesn't suggest he's an injury-prone player. If he can stay fit next season, I'm really excited about what he can offer. I'm excited if they do sign a Harvey Barnes as well, which I think probably will happen. I think you've got to look at the statistics. And I see Leicester fans talking about how they love him. They talk a little bit about his inconsistencies at times. I think he's one of those players that is either very hot or can be very cold. And that's probably why he isn't already at the very top of the game. But with the right coaching, and I think he would fit perfectly into our team. And you can't really look past the fact, and I don't know the exact stats, but it's incredible when you look at the way we cherish a Miguel Almiron or cherish an Alan Saint-Maximin, and you look at him at Saint-Maximin in particular, by the way, genuinely look at his goals and assists output. It's just not even like, I think I'd said this was a term I'd said a while back when we talked about the start of the summer. If you look at Harvey Barnes' statistics, he literally, Alan Saint-Maximin in the Premier League couldn't lace his boots. Not even close. Alan Saint-Maximin has mirrored the statistics that he produced in Ligue 1 in the Premier League almost perfectly. Similar amount of games, similar amount of goals, similar amount of assists. That to me tells you a player obviously to step up in levels. Isn't a player that's going to produce you a lot of goals, no matter where he goes or what he does. Isn't a player that's going to produce you a lot of assists wherever he goes and whatever he does. Has only shown in flashes in 6 games here, 7 games there, where it's like, wow, he's unplayable. Like, he's undroppable, unplayable. Has never shown that kind of consistency, which is why his numbers don't get up into the type of numbers that Harvey Barnes does. Harvey Barnes scores goals, and there isn't another wide player. He'll play out on when he signs, if he signs, we'll play out on the left there, and I expect it would be I think it'll be a forward line all with a little bit of prove. I think the first choice forward line, in my opinion, looking at the way the squad's shaped now, would probably be something like Harvey Barnes on the left, Anthony Gordon on the right, and Alexander Isak in the middle. All young, sort of early to mid-20s, speed, good technique, all of them. I think that's one of the big things about Anthony Gordon that gets overlooked. He's got a lovely technique. He just needs to add a little bit of what Barnes does on the other side, and I think there's a lot of scope there for him to be a potentially better player, because he's got that size, he's got that speed, he's got amazing technique, he's got a good football. He sees passes. It hasn't happened for him so far in his career, but he's got all of those tools, and if somebody can mold them, which I believe if anybody's going to win this current game, if it's not Pep Guardiola, it's going to be Eddie Howe will mold them into a good player. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited about moving forward, as well as I might dwell on lack of pace here, lack of numbers there. I think there's a good. I'm not worried. I'm not like I was talking about Aston Villa's impressive business, talking about other teams or whatever. I'm not really that concerned. I think a lot of people get concerned about just player accumulating. I think this squad, I think it's a good team, which with a couple of minor tweaks, with a couple of injections of quality, we've already seen one. I don't see any reason why they can't improve. They'd have to be lucky with injuries again because the depth isn't there. But like I said before, you're not really going to get that kind of depth and quality until a few windows' time. You think of the transformation. So let's compare it to, let's roll the clock back 2 windows and talk about where we were in that window. And you're still going into a summer with players in a squad like Isaac Hayden, I can't remember who else would have been still in the squad back then. But yeah, Hayden's, Kieran Clark's, all these type of players were still in and around. There's been a massive change in the last 3 to 4 windows. Just got to imagine where the squad will be in 3 to 4 more.
Okay, ASM, you mentioned him earlier on, often a topic that we cover on NUFC Matters. Few photographs circulating yesterday of removal vans, etc. I tend not to get sucked into stuff like that because it's without confirmation, and the only day that I'll believe that ASM is leaving when the club announce it. I still feel that ASM could do something this season at Newcastle. I think he could be very useful in the Champions League, certainly in the Champions League squad, and a very good player to have coming off the bench in any game. I don't think he's going to start games if he does stay at Newcastle. But lots of people asking, what's your views this week? I mean, they will start changing week to week as we see, as we see Eddie pick his teams for the friendlies. Of course, we'll have a clearer idea of where he's at. Are you still in the mindset that he probably will go, Liam?
Yeah, I'd say I was. Yeah, I'd say I was. I think again, I think he can be a player who can have some value, add some value to the squad next season. And in an ideal world, you'd probably look to keep him in the squad because of what he can do. He's got some parts of his game are unrivaled in Premier League football, and he's quite unique in a sense. But yeah, I think if he can find some money, if somebody can find some money for him, and he can further improve the squad, I think now's the time to get rid of Saint-Maximin. I don't think he's improved. Unless you get a Saudi team willing to pay a lot of money for him, and I'm talking 40 million here, which is kind of what they were asking for last summer when his stock was higher, by the way. Saint-Maximin had a higher stock last summer than what he did this summer. I don't think you'll get anybody outside of the Saudis paying anything like that kind of money to sign Saint-Maximin. probably talking 15 million less. But I think now is the time if he can reinvest that in a player that ultimately, let's be honest, you want somebody that Eddie Howe's happier with. I'll trust him. If he's happier with Harvey Barnes than he is Alan Saint-Maximin, he's got enough cash in the bank with the success that he's had so far to be trusted on that one. And that still goes back to January as well. Because Anthony Gordon, let's be brutally honest, in that first 6 months at the club, didn't really have a place in the team or the squad. He just felt like a bit of an ill fit. It was a bit strange almost. But let's trust Eddie Howe and see that he can mould a player. And I think we saw flashes in that. I mean, look, I think it was questionable whether he was actually... I watched a fair bit of that tournament in the summer. And I'm not really sure he was probably even England's best player in the team. But you know, there's a lot of people more qualified than me have made that decision that he was the player of the tournament. And well done to the lad. Quite an incredible thing to do. He looked out on his feet at times. He looked knackered. So I think they're going to have to treat him carefully, as they will have to with a lot of the lads who've come back. But they had to come back at some point, and I know players had holidays before they went to these tournaments, managed to get a little weekend after, and they should be ready to go. I mean, I'd be surprised if we see any of them today, but you just never know. I think you'll probably see the squad that's already been there, plus some youngsters. And I'm not really sure how the club are treating these first two games, particularly the one on Tuesday, which is a testimonial, which is never really great, is it? I think the real pre-season probably starts in America, if you ask my opinion.
Yeah, pre-season friendlies are exactly that. I always say I'd rather lose every pre-season friendly than and win your first game. To be honest, it's a chance to blow out the cobwebs. You know, get your ideas with regards to formation, blood in the new players, and essentially, you know, get your fitness levels up. It's as simple as that. That's what friendlies are, and curb your enthusiasm when you go to these games, because ultimately, the players who are featuring a lot of them are fringe players who may feature in the first team at some point, the first team squads, I hasten to add. We may see a few of the vintage players, your Lascelles, your Richies, etc. And yes, there will be players who, you know, will of course be playing in the first team for Newcastle United this season. But ultimately, you've just got to make sure that you don't go expecting to see Eddie Howe's full 11 at Gateshead today. Otherwise, you will be very disappointed. And I think that's a good point to make. Ifty says, I've just seen Villa putting another bid in for Diaby at 42 million. Liam, have we ever been in for him? At that price, it's a no-brainer. It would sort out our right wing.
Yeah, I think they have been in for him. I do think they like him. They've looked at him. They've been scouting him. Well, I think they've been scouting him for a lot longer than it's been in the press as well. I think it's probably been a good 2-year process. They know better than we do whether he fits into the team, whether they want to spend that kind of money. I think he looks like a player with a rapid pace and would potentially transform that side, but the question marks about his work rate and his work ethic. I think, speaking to people who, it's more his output when he doesn't, when the game turns over to the opposition. And I just don't think that would suit Newcastle United. That's not to say he wouldn't come in and be amazing, and might be amazing at Aston Villa, like I say. But I just don't think it's. I think they've gone all their eggs in one basket with regards to Harvey Barnes at the minute, and I think that's a deal that they're going to get done. I don't think Diaby's in the conversation at present.
Yeah. Okay. Just want to quickly mention the women's team as well, Liam. But we don't talk about them often on here. Well, we talk about them when there's something relevant. But they are going big guns, aren't they? Obviously released a few players at the end of last season, but brought in 5 players this week, including Keegan.
I know. It's been a really exciting week for the women's football team, and it's great to see. I think there were a few question marks about when everybody looked at the retained list that they put out maybe about a month ago. And I know people in women's football who keep an eye on those circles were quite surprised by some of the names that were actually dropped off the list in the retained list, because they've been at the football club a long time, but with success comes change, and they needed that. I think that squad had been pushed to its limits in getting promoted out of that tier of football, having tried for 2 years to do it. And I think they needed to inject some further up the food chain quality players who played at the top level, second tier for this season, which they will be targeting promotion from the third tier into the second tier at the first time of asking. Good to get some local lasses on board who obviously got the club at heart. And I'm really looking forward to seeing them. I'm really looking forward to the one thing that gets slightly overlooked by the Cellar Cup thing is there's an opportunity there to see the lasses at St James's Park, and I'm really looking forward to that one. I think it's on the Saturday. Is it on the Saturday? Sunday? I can't remember. It's one of the games in and around the men's Cellar tournament in the first weekend of August, and I think it'd be a great one. It'd be good if as many people as possible could hang around and make sure that they give the lasses, who again are going for success this season, all of our support.
Yeah, 100% get behind the women's team. It's great to see them progressing, and Amanda Staveley certainly leading the charge with that, and good to see them investing heavily and hopefully back at St James's Park soon. Krull to be kind says, does the club actively try and sell players the way that they should? They seem to be the only club struggling with this aspect. I mean, selling players.
Come on then, right? No, I'm going to be a little bit abrasive here, but Krull to be kind, you tell me what the right way to sell a footballer is. Of course, bloody stupid. Of course, the football club are actually trying to get rid of players. You've got one of the best, most astute negotiators dealing with this kind of thing, and the problem that they've got, and it's the big hangover from the underinvestment in Ashley's era, is that money was spent really badly as well at times. The obsession with getting in free transfers, which they had to do, with, that they're stuck with two players now who've got inflated wages because they were free transfers because they didn't pay a fee for them, Ryan Fraser and Jeff Hendrick. And let's be brutally honest about Jeff Hendrick's level at the moment is championship. Jeff Hendrick's a championship player. You will not get any championship clubs paying 50 grand a week for a midfielder. You'd be lucky if you get them to pay 15 for a player of that quality. So that's the problem. It's the hangover from the Ashley. You can't blame the people now in charge. They did a really good deal with the Isaac Hayden one last year. I thought that was a masterstroke. They managed to get him out on loan with the idea that obviously it was going to come and turn into a permanent deal that would have made the club money. Had Norwich followed through, and look, the club took a gamble on, most years at least one, sometimes two, very, very, very rarely, if ever, three of the teams that go down come back up. And they took a gamble on that, thinking that Norwich might be well placed to do that. It didn't happen. But that would have been Isaac Hayden out the door, and they would have got some money back on him. That's the type of deal they're going to have to do again for all of these players. Because football clubs aren't going to play. There's not going to be anybody else out there match Ryan Fraser's wages at Newcastle United. You can't blame the current regime for that. They didn't give that contract out and they didn't sign the player. Mm-hmm. They're actually just stuck with the remnants of what they were left from the previous regime. There's a lot of players who are in this squad who should have been long gone. I mean, he's been an okay servant to the football club, but Javier Manquillo, why is he still hanging around? And let's be brutally honest, Rafa Benitez didn't even want to sign him, and only signed him because there was nobody else he could get, and he knew, there was like agent contacts, and he had people that he trusted, and it was like he could sign the player, and that was it. He went and got the player. So the manager who signed him didn't even really want him at the football club at the time, and it's we're stuck with these players who they're not easy to shift on. They're easy to shift on if you give them away. So I'm pretty sure they'll be able to give Manquillo to a club in Spain. But again, he's on good wages. He's on good money. And the level of teams that are going to be signing him in Spain are not going to pay that kind of money for him. They're just not going to do it. So that's the problem, is that some of the players they're trying to get rid of, God, no, I've got to be careful. I don't want to be too harsh on some of them, but they're players that nobody wants. And how would you say? It's really difficult to sell a player that nobody wants. Certainly, nobody wants to take on the liability of the wages that they're going to have to give these players away or do something, or find a player who is willing to do something like they did with Dwight Gale. And just your contracts are binding. They're not always necessarily willing to do that. I think they might be able to do something, with some of the players that I've mentioned there, one in particular, but I think it's going to be a real struggle. I think that's the big hangover of the Ashley era, is that they're sitting there, and once you start adding it all up and accumulating 70-ish for Fraser, 50-ish for Hendrick, not sure what Hayden and others are on, starts to accumulate, and before you know it, you're talking about 250 grand a week. You're talking, £1 million a month pouring out the door on players who you cannot even get rid of.
Would we pay them off, Geordie Tune for Life says? Do you think that's an option, or do you think Newcastle might not go down that road?
Like I said, there's conversations to be had with some of these players, but again, some of them are on big contracts. I mean, we're not talking about players who come out. They're not all players who are out of contract next year or even the year after. Some of them have got 3 and 4 years on their deals, and again, that's the hangover of these ludicrous long contracts for players who didn't really warrant that kind of security in a squad, in a transient game where players do naturally come and go, have fluctuations in whether they fit in teams with managers. Giving players those, unless it's a real asset, giving those players lengthy contracts was always going to be fraught with danger and failure, which it kind of has with some of them.
Geordie Tune for Life also says, how about Nat Phillips? He played many games for Liverpool, also got Champions League experience, and at only 26 and a fee of around 10 to 15 million. This would be a great buy and a solid player. No. There you go. That's Liam's answer to that. Anything on Chiesa from Tom?
The clubs, the player side want him sold. Yeah, the players want. The Juventus are happy to let him go. The player side really want him to go. I think he's willing to go to the Premier League. Hence, we're seeing the fishing expedition of his people coming over this week. But I don't necessarily see that one developing at this as I hear things are at the moment. I don't really see that one developing. But I mean, I hope I'd prove wrong, because if you manage to sign the player, the Chiesa of the Euros a few years back, you're getting an absolute top tier elite talent. If you sign the Chiesa who's underperformed largely for Juventus, then not so much.
Yeah, was mentioned last night on the Migos that was 2 more elite signings were probably coming. Any suggestions on who? No, Neil, but it's a question for the professionals tomorrow. I'm sure we'll discuss that tomorrow night. I agree, Liam. I attempted to work out how much the players the club want to trim from the squad would still earn if they just sit there on their contracts, and the amount combined is ridiculous. Fraser's contract is until 2025, Hayden's till 2026, says David. Bond's numbers are way better than Chiesa, says Craig. Funko Freddy says, question, men, if the Toon have got a 5 to 10 year plan and we're not going back over, how quick do you think, say, the Villa manager would be under pressure, with Liverpool, Spurs and Chelsea all gunning for better this season? We'll broaden that question a little bit for Funko. I mean, yeah, managers are often under pressure when things don't go right. Eddie Howe's had a wonderful baptism at St James's Park. The great escape followed by the qualification for Champions League. Should Newcastle get off to an average start and find themselves outside of that European slots, for example, and out of the League Cup early, and a decimated, a not so good start in the Champions League, then, maybe things would get a little bit twitchy. But, we forget Newcastle haven't suddenly become a bad team overnight. We've got a team that finished in the Champions League last year, who've learned and grown as a team. They've got a wonderful team ethos and atmosphere in that dressing room, and they've just added another top player to that dressing room in Tonali. So with hopefully more to come. So I'm playing devil's advocate, I guess, with that question. But I mean, will there be pressure if Newcastle, get off to an average start, Liam, or do you think people will give them the grace?
No, I think it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I think the only pressure that really matters is the pressure that comes from the top, and I don't think there will be on any on Eddie Howe. It's all hypotheticals. I mean, how disastrous are we talking here? The start, you know what I mean? Like, are we talking about absolute disaster? I think Eddie Howe's the man. I think they believe he's the man. I think they have from the start. I think it's probably time for us to stop talking about those kind of hypotheticals when it comes to Eddie Howe, because let's just see how it goes. With Aston Villa, I mean, they're using a totally different process and model. Aston Villa, the way they're spending this summer, will not be able to spend like that continuously. We're seeing the Nottingham Forest effect. So I've seen a lot of people in the past go, why? How can they go and do that? And we can't do, we're FFP this, FFP that. Nottingham Forest will not spend the kind of money that they spent last summer, this summer, or next summer, even if they stay in the Premier League. It's the same for Aston Villa. Clubs take calculated risks and calculated gambles on when they spend their money and when they don't within that 3-year cycle. And we're just seeing a splurge from some and not from others. But let's be consistent here with this. I think we're going to see a spend of around 100 million at least with Newcastle United when all totals are added up. So yeah, I don't think they're going to be left behind by many.
Derek says, do you think the club just want players that fit the system and also fit the ethos? I mean, that's a yes, isn't it, really?
I think that's two of the key things that they've got to do. I think it's the last thing in the world you'd want to do is sign a player who doesn't fit the way you want to play and doesn't fit the characteristics of the team and of the squad. People could potentially upset the apple cart. So I think those are probably two of the first things that are ticked off. You don't just accumulate good players because you think you can get them. You accumulate players who are going to have a real distinct place in the squad and going to add value to your first team.
There's the list there that Sutty's compiled of wages, I believe. It's a hell of a sum, isn't it? And that's why you need to get the likes of Darlow, Manquillo, Hendrick, Hayden, Fraser, Lewis off your books.
Yeah, it's
staggering.
It is, and I think it's one thing that gets overlooked. I think everyone just plays certain sections of the fan group just play like Football Manager in their heads. They're like, "Oh, I'll get him out here and I'll do this and do that." It's not that easy, you know. It's not that easy. And the days of the Championship chasing Premier League wages and chasing Premier League money, which happened probably 5 years ago. A lot of them got themselves into a lot of financial trouble doing that, and they're just not doing it now. They're not taking Premier League players on Premier League wages. They're taking them highly subsidised, and that's the outball for the type of deals that we're trying to do now. Probably sailed away 5 years ago. You're not going to get Championship clubs paying overinflated wages on the promise and the hope that, oh, this is the year we'll get back up. It's just not going to happen.
Okay, thanks for that wages thing. It's honestly, in the cold light today, just looking at that is incredible. It really, really is. Whoever we sign, there will be upgrades on what we have. We had the second worst injury list last year. I'm quietly confident that we will do some decent business. Yeah,
that would surprise me, actually. Maybe I'm just looking at it through. Maybe I'm just not seeing it, but I don't really think Newcastle had a bad season when it comes to injuries last year.
No, I think I would agree. Yeah, I would say that it probably wasn't as bad as others, but you know, I can't argue if the stats out there to prove it. Then I'll go with it. We'll go to Gateshead today anyway. You know, it's an afternoon kickoff. 7,000 people there. We've debated on the show this week about the you know, we all feel it's a bit disappointing to see that, you know, more of that £9.99 doesn't really go to Gateshead. It's obviously on National League's TV channel. So, you know, it's the deal that they've signed, you know, that they essentially get a percentage of that. I think Stewart works out at something like 6 pence per person, you know, for the club. So, you know, whatever the case, the gate money. That, I mean, yeah, it's not a fortune. I think the you know, because it's split between all the teams in the league also have to get some as well. So it's the contract you sign, I think, when you're in the National League. But at least there's coverage for anybody who can't get there and who can't get along. The great news is, of course, that the 7,000 people who bought tickets, some of those, I think it's about 130 corporates of about, you know, 100 quid a person, 90 quid, 100 quid a person, and all the tickets from 20 to 25. All of that money is going to Gateshead. Newcastle, of course, waiving, you know, any rights to having any of that money. And I think that's great. It's a great gesture. And it means it's a great earner for Gateshead today, Liam.
Yeah. Yeah, and it probably should be something that Newcastle United look to do more often for the near neighbours in and around the area. Lots of football clubs in and around that sort of level, a little bit lower. They should look to do that more often. I think it's a good first starter. It's just a training game, really, isn't it? It's just a blowing off the cobwebs, get the legs moving, get as many players on the pitch as you possibly can, get some minutes in the legs for lads who need it. And don't give any to ones who don't, particularly the lads who've been away in the summer. It's a great day. I think it'd be a good day. I just hope the weather isn't too bad. I'm looking out the window here above my laptop and it's looking a bit grey. So hopefully it stays decent, because a lot of it's uncovered. I think as the last time I was there at Gateshead, a lot of it's uncovered. So take your brollies and your rain jackets a day just in case.
Yeah, seeing some of the pictures on social media, it's raining and cats and dogs in Gateshead at the moment. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of time before kick-off for it to brighten up. You don't mind it raining now; it'll be a little bit later, won't it? When people are going to be a bit knocked if they get soaked.
Yeah. I think but I think it's the concept of Newcastle United doing this for a club right on the doorstep and helping them out as much as they possibly can. I think it's a really, really positive move. Really positive.
Predictions, you can't really give a prediction, Tom, for this one. I mean, you could say 10-0, but let's face it, or 2-2 or whatever, it's not going to really make any difference, because the amount of players that'll get a run out today, and that's what I was saying about curb your enthusiasm if you go into today's game. Enjoy it for what it is. It's a game of football, which you haven't had for a few weeks since the season ended, but it's not going to be as competitive. It will be competitive for Gateshead, because Gateshead will be playing against some players who are a lot better and a lot fitter.
Yeah, they will. A little bit further ahead they are in the schedule. Play a really good brand of football. I think that's one of the things I'm looking forward to as well. I really enjoy watching Gateshead whenever I've watched them under Mike Williamson. For a pretty less than silky, no nonsense-ish defender, he's produced a team, and his ethos, the way he's got them playing, is quite incredible. They really play like a team much above their levels, very much at home against higher opposition, who we've seen in the FA Cup in recent years. A good side, and I think it'll be a good little test, and it'll be a good little game. But like you say, just treat it as you come. I wouldn't go there expecting any kind of result or I've got to win by this. I want to see him. I want to see that. I think these first two games I would take with a pinch of salt. Like I say, today is after only 1 week of them being back, and Tuesday night's a testimonial. And we know the kind of antics that can go on in testimonials. So how competitive that fixture it'll be in itself is definitely up for question.
Yeah. As always, for your Newcastle United information, we do advise you to go to your Newcastle World QR code, scan and sign for Newcastle World's free email newsletters, and you can read the most up-to-date news on Newcastle United there. And things will be hotting up, Liam, for you and the lads. You'll be looking forward to the season ahead. So we'll be covering quite a bit of that over the next few weeks, and getting young Jordan on as well at some point on the show.
Yeah, we're going to get Jordan, going to get Dom as well, just to let you guys sort of meet the lads ahead of the talking that we're doing on the eve of the season. So it'd be good to get them on and just chat a little bit of football, and you can see a little bit of what they're about as well.
Yeah, we did advertise it in the advert section. So go to NUFCmatters.com and you can get your tickets for the pre-season talking. Ian saying, did you fancy a run out today, Liam? Maybe Eddie will bring you on if it goes to penalties with your pedigree.
I think with a proper keeper in the net, they might have got a hand to that one. Like, that's all I'll say. But no run outs for me. Thursday night at the Walker Dome's enough for me. 7 aside for an hour and a half. That's more than enough for this body can take.
Great stuff. All right, I'm back tomorrow night, 6 o'clock live with the professionals, myself, Mr. Penman and Mr. Mitchell. Liam, as always, great to see you, mate. See you next week. Take care.
Cheers.
We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.